Hey everybody, welcome back to Decode Tech. We're going to talk about basic Python math in this video, and we've already talked about a couple of them like addition and subtraction, but we're going to add some more operations we can do in math and a little bit more of the math rules in Python, and we're going to talk about some other things in between there, and hopefully till the end of the video you'll understand math in Python a little bit better. So let's get into the video. Alright, so I'm going to open idle like normal. And we're going to start to talk about the four basic math operations. I've already went over them briefly. They're addition, which is just a plus sign. There's subtraction, which is a minus sign. There's multiplication, which I believe I said is a star operator or an asterisk, not your normal like X sign or whatever math books normally have for your multiplication. You're going to have to get used to a star operator. And then there is division, which is a forward slash, not to be confused with a backslash. It's a forward slash, not two forward slashes. Oops. Well, you can do two forward slashes, but that's a different kind of division. Regular division is just one forward slash in Python. So the four basic are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So we can do 5 plus 10, hit enter, and that'll evaluate that instruction to add together to 15. Notice I did not type print 5 plus 10, and I still got 15 to print out to the screen. That's because we're in the shell, and the shell will just evaluate your instruction and it'll just display it right away. Whereas if you were actually in a Python file writing a script, you would need to have the print, but since you're in the shell, you don't need it. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about more types of data. Last time I said that these phrases I've been talking about are really just strings, which are text in Python. Now, two more data types are to deal with the numbers. There's whole numbers, which are called integers, and that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. Those are all whole numbers. And then there's what are called floating point numbers, which are decimal point numbers. So you can just think of it if the decimal point floats around, floating point number. So there's strings, which are text, there's integers, which are whole numbers, and there's decimal point numbers, which are called floating point numbers. So for example, if I do 5 times 2, I get 10 without any decimal points. That is an integer. If I want a floating point value, either side I can either do 5.0 times 2, or I can do 5 times 2.0. If either side, if the number has a 0.0, it'll give you a floating point result. Notice we get 10.0. Even though the 0.0 doesn't add any value to the 10, it is showing that it's a floating point data type, which is very important to Python. And I'll get more into the importance of data types and how to work with them in the next video in this series. So we're going to move on for now. Just know that floating point numbers are decimal point numbers, and whole numbers are integers, and phrases are strings, or text is strings. So all these symbols, plus, minus, divide, multiply, they are all called operators. They operate on the data around them. So if you have 5 times 2, the times operator, the multiplication operator rather, modifies that data to give you the result. And sometimes things are operators that you wouldn't think of normally being operators. For example, last week when we talked about variables, we had name, and then we had an equal sign, and then after the equal sign came the data assigned to it. So here we have a string that says data, and this equal sign is actually also an operator. It's called the assignment operator in Python because it assigns this data to the variable name in this case. So this is the assignment operator. It's an operator just like multiplication and addition and all those. All right, so back to math. So in the order of operations, in basic math, you would have learned some basic order of operations. You would have probably learned that multiplication comes before addition and various things like that. Also, you would have learned that if you put something in parentheses, that gets evaluated first. So if you want something to evaluate ahead of everything else in Python, you as well can surround it with parentheses, and that'll put priority on whatever's in the parentheses. So the order of operations that you're used to should also apply to Python. All right, so we talked about the 4 basic operators, and we threw in the assignment operator with variables. Now let's talk about a couple more yet before we wrap up this basic math lesson. So if you want to do exponents, you can do 2 stars operator. So it looks like this. If you have the number 3 and you want to take it to the power of 3, you do the multiplication symbol twice. So star star and then the power of 3, put 3, hit enter, and it'll give you 27. If you want to take it to the power of 2, you do 3 star star 2, and that gives you 9. Now you should know that that's the same thing as doing like 3 times 3. But the advantage of using the exponent is you have less typing. For example, if you do 3 to the power of 40, instead of writing out 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, 40 times, you just 3 star star 40, boom, answer prints out. The other thing that is nice about these exponents is you can do floating point exponents. Remember, floating point is just a decimal point number. So we could do 3 to the exponent of 4.5. Right like that, just gives us a result. All right, so enough on exponents. Let's do another one called modulus. I think it's spelled modulus like that. I might be wrong. If you know, you can correct me in the comments down below. But the modulus operator is the percent sign. So for example, let's do 10 modulus 2, and that gives us 0. So what modulus gives us is a remainder of dividing. So for example, 2 goes into 10 and even 5 times, so there's no remainder, so we get 0 as the result, because it's going to give us the remainder if there is one. So for example, let's do 4 modulus 3. So if you did 3 divided by 4, or 4 divided by 3 rather, you would get the remainder of 1, because 3 goes in 1 whole times into 4, then you bring the 3 down, 4 minus 3 is 1, so you have a remainder of 1. This might not look super useful as it is, but it can be very useful. For example, one use is to find prime numbers. You can do a number to the modulus of 2, and if the remainder is 0, you can find prime numbers. It can be really handy for certain things. We'll probably see that later on in our tutorial series. All right, for the last 2 ones I'm going to talk about, I opened a clean shell just so everything is easier to follow. This is going to be something we already looked at. This is going to be the incrementing operator and the decrementing operator. It's plus equal sign and minus equal sign right beside each other. And what these do, or what I talked about last lesson with variables, I said we could have something like score gets score plus 1, and that would take whatever is stored in score, add 1 to it, and then store it back in score again. Now if I run this, we're going to get a traceback error because name score is not defined. Now you might say, well, we're defining it right here. But the problem is you're using it on the right side of the equation as well. And since score is not defined to be used here already, then it throws us score is not defined error. So we can fix that. We can do score gets 1, and now score is storing the integer, because an integer is a whole number of 1. So now we can just type score to prove that, and you see it does have 1. So now let's do the score gets score plus 1. So now if we type score, remember I don't need to use print because I'm in the interactive shell, but if you're in a program or a script you would have to. And you see we do get 2, so it took whatever was in score, added 1 to it, and stored it back in score. This is called incrementing. Now we could do the same with a minus. Score gets score minus 1, and you see we'll be back to 1. That's called decrementing. So it's decrement and increment. Increment is increasing, decrement is decreasing. That's how I remember it. And the operators I talked about were plus equals and minus equals. They offer us a shortcut to do this very thing. So instead of doing score gets score plus or minus 1, we can do score plus equals 1 to increase it by 1, or we can do score minus equals 1 to minus it by 1. And by the way, you don't always have to increase or decrease by 1. You can do it by 2, 3, 4, or whatever number you wish. So let's do it by 3. Now if we type score, we get -2 because it used to have 1. We took whatever was in score, minused it by 3, so it's -2. And so this is what is called syntactic sugar for this. Besides that, the 1 would have to be a 3 for it to be completely equal statements. But it's shorter typing. It hides some of the complexity sometimes behind the scenes of what's going on. They call it syntactic sugar. So this is the same thing as this. And the same thing for incrementing would be the same thing as that line. So if we did score plus equals 1, we should now have -1 stored in score, and we do. So this is incrementing, this is the decrementing operator. All right, so just like last lesson, I have a little quiz for you. So if you want to pause the video here, write down your answers somewhere, and then if you unpause the video, I'll reveal the answers to you. All right, any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section down below. Hopefully this made sense. If not, I'll be sure to try to help you out. Also, the next video is going to be more on these data types that I talked about and explaining why they're important and a little bit more of how they work. And so stick around for that. If you're not subscribed, please like the video if you found it informative and consider sharing it with anybody that might find it interesting. And we hope to see you all in the next video.